Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where we have quite a bit to discuss, because we're not just going to go over this week's box office and streaming numbers, but because I'm going to give you my top 10 box office prospects for 2024. The movies that I think have the best odds at the box office. And of course, as always, I'm eager to hear who you think are the frontrunners down below. But before we get to prospects, let's talk cold hard numbers with the first weekend of 2024. And there's already stuff happening. Wonka continues his chocolate campaign, now number one for 3 of its 4 weeks in release. And with just a 36% drop in week 4, that's really impressive. The hope that it will continue to play all the way through January is looking pretty good. The only real question is if Paramount's Mean Girls, also a surprise musical, will take a bite out of Wonka's audience when it opens this Friday. Mean Girls is expected to open anywhere from 20 to 40 million. They're not sure how this thing's going to play. And the review embargo lifts this Wednesday. Same with Anyone But You, I think, which has a similar snarky vibe to Mean Girls. So it could affect both these movies. Now, Anyone But You is further down the top 10 this weekend, but it's the only movie to still experience a surge after last weekend's Surge-O-Rama. Now, it's just 9%, but a surge is a surge. In fact, the little rom-com that could is close to surpassing Jennifer freaking Lawrence. That's incredible. Although, interestingly, both these movies are from Sony. They're finding some revenue with this type of film. Kate Hudson should be glad. She was talking about the rom-com recently. Well, Sony's keeping it alive. No Hard Feelings, by the way, blew up on digital and then Netflix, where Sony has their streaming deal. So expect Anyone But You to do the same, and perhaps even a little bit better. This is fantastic for Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell, who sure could use some fantastic news, because they can now both use this movie's success to book more work. I'm sure like studio executives are like, what do you know? People do want to see you. All right, be in my movie. Back to Wonka. Paul King's Confection is now way past 400 million worldwide. Better than the first Dune. Although that, of course, came out during the pandemic and was released day and date on HBO Max. Wonka is also, though, ahead of the latest Transformers. That's not too surprising. But get this. It did better than John Wick 4. Wow. And it's closing in on Quantumania and Elemental. Where's the sequel announcement, Warner Brothers? I mean, it's not like they're trying to win awards here. Maybe they're waiting for the Oscar nominations to come out January 23rd. But I think that ship has sailed for Wonka. So I think they don't desperately need to, but I think it would help Wonka significantly at the box office. Of course, it has digital and streaming down the line. But I think if they were to announce a sequel in the next week or so, that would give Wonka a second wind and make it more likely that it would play all the way through the end of January. And more good news for Warner Brothers, though, who also, Hollywood could use more good news in general. And for the most part, this is a pretty positive movie math today. Although in some cases, the bar has been lowered, like with Aquaman 2. It passed the century mark, domestic, woohoo! The first movie made $1 billion, and here we are being like 1/10 of that. We're like, yay! But the Marvels couldn't do that. They couldn't get to the century mark. This sequel is also expected to pass 400 million, although probably not by much, worldwide. So again, while that's a far cry from the first film's $1 billion, it's a lot better than other recent superhero fare has been able to do, because audiences do seem partial to this take on the DC character. What do you think is the appeal of the Aquaman movies? Is it wet buff dudes in a tropical setting? I'm sure that is to some degree, but there's got to be more. What do you think it is? If a studio executive said, I need to know so I can repeat it, why Aquaman both movies seem to do pretty well, what would you put in your report? The movie is doing solid enough numbers that I actually am now kind of seeing Jason Momoa continuing as Lobo. I'm like, maybe we could do it. Although I think a number of casual fans would just wonder why Aquaman was now suddenly dressed like a member of KISS. I don't know if they could make the transition, because he's just basically Lobo now. And there was a new movie in theaters this weekend, Night Swim, which everybody involved with should be embarrassed by, because considering that the horror genre has been on fire lately and been so inventive and interesting, This just seems like a massive step back. It's like suddenly the genre is treading water, at best. Diversity demos were excellent, though, showing the widespread appeal of the horror genre, which is why Hollywood loves it. But really, I think we would be past making movies like Night Swim by now. We'll talk about it, in fact, a little bit more in just a moment. But first, I want to point out that Migration, also from Universal, is doing still very well, now way ahead of Disney's Wish Domestic. And at this rate, it'll finish just a touch behind Universal's Trolls Band Together. So their animation, these animated movies aren't performing the way that they're really supposed to, but at least, the Universal Animation Factory is working, because, it's very much a factory, because they send these movies to digital and then Peacock, because Universal is leading the way, making the most of today's fractured marketplace, which we've been discussing, because not everyone watches movies in theaters anymore, but that doesn't mean they don't watch movies. A recent study claimed that the pandemic cost Hollywood 1 out of every 5 moviegoers, which is a fancy way of saying 20%. So 20% less people go to the movies than before the pandemic. But as I said, that doesn't mean they're not watching movies, and Universal's realized that. They get the audience at every stop. Theatrical, digital, streaming, all aboard. And it's working. They're making quite a bit of money. Although, here comes Night Swim. I don't really think anybody would watch Night Swim at any point on any platform. Would you? I mean, come on. Hollywood, particularly the film industry, is still grappling with the new reality of audiences not watching whatever they put out, quality be damned. It used to be, this is the movie's weekend, don't be a party pooper, go see it. But there is so much streaming these days, which has become a spout of not totally, but for the most part, the level of quality on streaming is better than the ratio is better than at the multiplex. So you have a spout of high quality content at a very low cost as a competitor. Well, these days, a low-ish cost. And that brings up another interesting point. As the price of streaming services goes up, that leaves less money even, and there's not that much to begin with, to spend at the multiplex, where you get less bang for your buck. With a streaming service, you get content all month long, and there's just a steady wave of it. But with a movie ticket, you get to see just one movie once at that moment, which is, I guess, where subscription services at movie theaters come in handy, like A-List and Regal Unlimited. Although, you have to wonder how much money are those really bringing in compared to like singular ticket sales. What also is interesting about this is that this is studios shooting themselves in the foot once again, because most of these streaming services are theirs. So they're cutting down on the entertainment budget, which also applies to their movies in theaters. Although when Amazon comes along, Amazon does try to release their movies theatrically, and they're just about to add an extra $3 to the price of Amazon Prime, because it includes, unless you're willing to watch ads on Prime Video. All right, now, The Boys in the Boat and The Iron Claw both saw very solid holds. I mean, they're not setting the box office on fire, but it looks good for them later down the line on digital and streaming. Ferrari had a solid hold as well, to be fair, but started out so low it doesn't really matter. And I think some people will check Ferrari out down the line, but I just don't see it as strong as The Boys in the Boat and The Iron Claw. The Boys in the Boat and The Iron Claw are both excellent movies, which I highly recommend. Ferrari, not so much. It has like 2 or 3 really good scenes, and that's it, in a long sea of mediocrity at best. All right, The Color Purple is this is interesting as well, and an interesting conversation, a really interesting debate. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. So The Color Purple is having a real problem at the box office, with a 60% drop and only its second weekend. It was so strong on day 1, basically, which was Christmas Day. But at this rate, even though it only cost $100 million to make, not including advertising, although did Warner Brothers really advertise this movie? But the studio is now unlikely to even turn a profit on it. But let's see how it shakes out during awards season. But it's worth noting, if you've been on social media at all over the past few days or weeks, I'm sure you've seen this. But the conversation surrounding The Color Purple has largely become about how badly the cast was treated. And they were treated horribly and unfairly. For actors in a film of that caliber with that budget from a major studio, it was really horrible, what we're hearing. But one has to wonder if that drama surrounding the film, has eclipsed the film itself, something DC is very familiar with. But I do want to point out that the conversation on The Color Purple is calling out how talent of color is not getting fair treatment in Hollywood. It really is shocking when you see these stories. These are things, the things that they aren't getting are considered industry standard. So even if you don't feel they're appropriate, that doesn't matter. The point is that they're industry standard and everyone is supposed to get them. They're not even supposed to have to ask. And so it's horrible that these actors are being put in that situation. And if this conversation can fix that, how talent of color is treated in Hollywood, perhaps it will have been worth the hit to this movie. Not so much for Warner Brothers, but then they should have given their cast the industry standard. And I think that that's probably why this is going to help, because look how this is blowing up in Warner Brothers' face down the line. They're paying for this publicity awards tour, and it's just trashing them. Also, Oprah, who apparently caused a lot of the problems, but then fixed a lot of the problems. It's just a disaster for, I think, everybody involved. And I'm curious to see how you feel about this situation, but I do feel to deprive them of industry standard is horrible, and it, really needs to be fixed. Because there have been whispers, and like some people have been talking about this on the fringe for quite some time. So this is the most attention I think this inequity has gotten to date. And Poor Things popped back into the top 10. Right now, it's really just a trickle of moviegoers, because it's at the very bottom of the top 10. It's been kind of bobbing in and out. Now, what's interesting to me is that when the very risque Saltburn hit Prime Video, it blew up on social media as people were in shock. Some delighted, some not, but everybody in shock. And I think some people are equating these two movies in terms of risque. They are not the same at all. Poor Things is like, if Saltburn is like a 10, Saltburn's not a 10. If Saltburn is like, let's say an 8 on the risque scale, I would say Poor Things is like a 20. So I'm very curious to see the reaction from a larger audience when Poor Things hits digital or eventually streaming, and more people finally. I think right now a lot of people are talking about the movie who haven't seen it. So I think that the discourse really hasn't opened up. I mean, it's only made like $14 million, which is crazy. All right, now here are my 2024 top 10 box office prospects. And I cheated because I'm starting with number 11, which is a pretty good sign for 2024, that even with the delays caused by the strikes and many movies fleeing to 2025, 2024 still has more than 10 potential blockbusters. And on that note, when I look at the 2024 release schedule to make this list, I saw some potential solid hits as well. But what I'm going for here are blockbusters. I saw movies that I thought could do very solid business in theaters and then probably blow up on digital and streaming. But I'm talking doing business in the theater like their movie is supposed to. Well, at least, I don't know. We'll find out what a movie's supposed to do in the next few years. Like, can this be fixed or is this the new normal? All right, number 11, what did I have to include? The Fall Guy. Why? Well, sure, Ryan Gosling usually doesn't do very well at the box office, but he's coming off of Barbie in a very similar role. This is another high-concept rom-com. And while Emily Blunt's box office herself isn't consistent, she has been in hits. Also, this is the big reason I included this. This movie took over Deadpool 3's abandoned release date, kicking off summer 2024. Add to that Universal being on a roll these days. They just drank Disney's milkshake in terms of kicking off the summer. Disney has done that for the past decade or so. So I feel pretty good about the Fall Guys box office prospects. All right, number 10. Now we're in the proper top 10. Number 10, and it's interesting, it's still a lot of sequels and nostalgia. As much as people complain about that, it's still the best shot that Hollywood has. Although I'm open to surprises. All right, number 10, Beetlejuice 2. Everybody loves the first movie, and for the sequel to bring back Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, and Catherine O'Hara, with Tim Burton back behind the camera, plus Danny Elfman, well, that gives us hope this sequel might be a worthy one. Not to mention, this is from Brad Pitt's production company. He's a producer on this movie, and they usually produce Oscar contenders, and World War Z, which was also quite good. Plus Jenna Wednesday Ortega joining the party, and her showrunners, who wrote the script as well, even though she squabbled with them a little bit. They're back together. So this is not only like a Beetlejuice sequel, but it's almost like a de facto Wednesday sequel as well. And this movie comes out in early September, so it can play all the way through Halloween. Sounds like a hit to me. Although you never know with Hollywood. But as I said, these are the prospects. All right, number 9, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. You know, I didn't get to do a trailer reaction to this, but when I did first see the trailer, it didn't seem very Ghostbusters-y to me, except when they were driving Echo 1, you know, and you hear like the siren and they're back in New York City. That was very cool. But the more I see this trailer, which is a lot because Sony is playing it in front of a lot of movies, I'm getting the feeling that this is a solid family comedy coming out during spring break with pretty much no competition at the box office. I mean, 2 weeks later, you've got Godzilla x Kong, or as some of you like to say, Godzilla loves Kong, but that looks awful. So even though this movie doesn't look great to me, it still has Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, Gilded Age fans unite, the original Ghostbusters, plus some great comedians in supporting roles, Kumail and Johnny. I mean, come on, we're all going to go see it. I mean, again, it would have to be awful for us just not to go. Spring break, very hot corridor. All right, number 8, Dune Part 2. I'm not sure about this one either. The first trailer was also awful. And it was so bad that nobody really paid attention to the second trailer, which was amazing. A number of you, you guys were like, you got to watch the second trailer, Grace. You just got to. And I finally did. And I was like, oh, wow, it is amazing. But again, hardly anyone's paying attention to it. And in the movie, speaking of trailers being played in theaters, Warner Brothers is still playing that first crappy trailer instead of the new amazing one. What the heck? But if Dune 2 can get great reviews, it will be the first big movie in months when it hits March 1st. It'll be coming after a big dry spell. So I think there's a chance it could still be a hit. Plus, with Timothée Chalamet coming off of Wonka and Zendaya now free to promote it, we're past the actors strike, along with other members of the huge cast, big cast. That's very helpful when promoting a film because you just have so many people out there promoting it. That could definitely help get audiences into theaters, especially for a film that makes such great use of premium formats. If you want to see Dune, you'll want to see it on IMAX or Dolby. All right, number 7, Mufasa, The Lion King. A little lower here, considering this is The Lion King. I mean, that's an incredible brand with both the original animated movie and basically the CGI shot-for-shot remake, both doing boffo business. This also is Disney's first follow-up to one of their live-action remakes, and it could open the door to more. Come on, Aladdin 2, where is that? They're supposed to be making it. Although the Will Smith situation certainly made that a little bit more complicated. But I think there's still an audience for Aladdin 2. I'd even love some more Beauty and the Beast. This one is in great hands with Barry Jenkins directing and Jeff Nathanson scripting. But still, original stories are very hard to pull off, particularly in Hollywood, even when based on beloved IP. But they're totally in new territory here, and I think that could be difficult for them. And what about the music that's so crucial to The Lion King? No Elton John this time. He really didn't like them doing that CGI remake. But Pharrell Williams is stepping up instead. Williams has had an extremely successful partnership with Illumination Animation, but this is a whole other level. Can they recapture The Lion King magic with a new story? I mean, it's a prequel. They might be borrowing here and there, but it's basically new material. But if they can, ka-ching! Number 6, Wicked Part 1. Speaking of music, this one is a proven banger. In fact, Frozen lifted so much from Wicked, including Idina Menzel, it's basically Hollywood's first adaptation of the material. Can Wicked come in and still find an audience post-Frozen? For instance, there are so many things that Star Wars and Superman are based on, but when that original property comes into Hollywood, like John Carter, nobody cares, even though that was actually the original. So that's a potential problem for Wicked. And I was real nervous about John Chu directing, but then I saw the elaborate set pics, and I felt a lot better. Still, Cynthia Erivo is controversial with some audiences, and now the recently divorced Ariana Grande has started seeing her co-star in this movie, causing an end to his marriage as well. Will that cost her any fans? It was certainly a little bit of a moment on social media, and will it distract potentially from this film, especially since both individuals, Ariana Grande and her I think his name's Ethan something. Well, I'm sure some of you, it's burned into your mind, but they're both in this movie. But it's Wicked, which is still playing on Broadway, after 20 years on Broadway. That has got to count for something. That has got to translate in some way at the box office. Although, as some of you might already be typing, it didn't translate for Cats or Phantom of the Opera, which I believe are the other two highest. I think it goes Phantom of the Opera, like The Lion King, there's something else in there, and I think I saw that Wicked just surpassed Cats as the longest runs in Broadway history. All right, number 5, Inside Out 2. Now, I hate this movie. But people are so excited about the sequel, and I'm even kind of jazzed. So speaking of things people love, they love Inside Out. The trailer for this sequel quickly became the most watched trailer in the history of Disney and Pixar animation, surpassing Frozen 2, which went on to be a huge hit. Your favorite core emotions, notice I said your because I don't like these guys, are getting new roommates. And so far, we just know about Maya Hawke as anxiety. Who else is in store, emotion-wise and celebrity-wise? Again, even I'm curious. There's a small wrinkle, though, speaking of more behind-the-scenes drama, that Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling aren't returning because Pixar lowballed their offers. Amy Poehler is getting $5 million to return, plus bonuses, while everyone else is getting $100,000. But Tony Hale and Lisa Lampier need $100K, so they're replacing those two. And I think that also says it's interesting about Lewis Black, right? That he's like, I'll take $100K. Still, controversy aside, this is likely to print money, and Pixar sure could use the hit. It's been a while. All right, number 4, Gladiator 2. I was tempted to put this higher up, but has Ridley Scott lost his magic? Even if you've enjoyed some of his recent films, their box office is not great. But this is Gladiator with an all-star cast. Even if you're not familiar with Paul Mescal's work, and some people very much are, you got Denzel, Pedro Pascal, Eddie from Stranger Things, Layla from Moon Knight. You're going to be interested in this film. The first film was not just a huge box office hit, but won Best Picture, including 4 other Oscars, and also Best Actor. Wow. I mean, this would have to be really, really bad for people not to go see the sequel. All right, but again, never underestimate Hollywood, their ability in that area. All right, number 3, Joker Folie à Deux, or Joker 2. Another huge box office hit and Oscar winner. And it's got the Batman lore to back it up, so it's got everything, including a new interpretation of Harley Quinn by none other than Lady Gaga. Will this start the Harley Quinn wars within the fandom? Will it split the fandom? Or will they all unite around a new Harley? I mean, Margot Robbie's been very generous about this, particularly considering the fact she tried to get Lady Gaga to be in Birds of Prey. And then Lady Gaga basically, went behind her back and took the Harley Quinn role. All right, so anyway. But, I mean, the movie looks so far. It looks so good. It looks incredible. It looks amazing. It looks absolutely amazing. It looks impossible to mess up. But again, never underestimate Hollywood in that regard. I know some stuff about this movie. I know it's got singing in it, but maybe it's really great singing. And there's also something else. There is an element which I won't spoil. But if they kept it, and I sure hope they didn't, but if they did keep it, I think it might cause a bit of a brouhaha on the internets and could turn off some audiences. That's all I'm going to say, because to say anything else would, I think I really want to maintain the surprises in these movies. So we'll see. The first film was so brilliant that I do trust Todd Phillips. I trust him to hopefully have taken that out. All right, number 2, Despicable Me 4. Who even really knows this movie is coming up? I mean, I was surprised when I went to see Migration that it had a Despicable Me short in front of it, which was pretty good. So European. I love it. But I put this at number 2 anyway because of the Despicable Me movies overall and the Minions spin-offs, which also print money. Oh, they almost always get $1 billion or close to it. It's incredible. And they've also taken over the Universal theme parks, etc. They're huge. And Mike White of White Lotus fame frickin' wrote this movie. How crazy awesome is that? He also, of course, did School of Rock, which is maybe a more family-friendly, good approximation. But people love that movie too. I mean, this is looking good. And they're releasing once again for the July 4th holiday, which has been very good to this franchise. Illumination surely has yet another huge hit on their hands. Then, of course, number 1, Deadpool 3. I know there's a lot of drama around Disney and Marvel these days, but I still believe in this movie because I believe in Ryan Reynolds, not only his ability to be funny, but his business savvy. I believe in the power of Wolverine, basically Marvel's Batman in terms of popularity. And with this being the No Way Home version of the Fox Marvel movies, the nostalgia factor is going to be off the charts. We're all going to have to go. They're going to make fun of what Fox got wrong, brilliantly so, I'm sure, but also make some of it right. Like the yellow suit on Wolverine. We already have that. What else are we getting? I'm so excited. Throw in Tom from Succession as a TVA agent. I mean, the only way this movie doesn't do well is if every single joke and surprise is ruined by anonymous scoopers online. And they're doing their best. That's why Ryan Reynolds finally had to actually speak up and address this. Let's hope scoopers and fans, at least, are sympathetic to his pleas. Don't pay attention to those scoops, man. Mute Deadpool 3. or just Deadpool. It's really rough. I'm really worried. I'm worried about the movie, but I still believe in it. So those are my top 10, actually 11, box office prospects for 2024. Again, I would love to hear your own predictions down below. All right, now let's head over to streaming, where Nielsen is back, but they also skipped a week. What's going on over there? Because they wanted to get back on schedule. They're already so far behind after taking New Year's off. They released the charts internally to some of the trades, and you might have seen them out of the corner of your eye here and there. I'm going to reference one, actually. I think I only saw the overall chart, actually. Like, what the heck, man? All right, so anyway, look at Leave the World Behind. And this was just its first weekend, 3 of the 7 days of this chart. Again, this is the Obamas who produced this movie, first real Hollywood hit. And it seems young Sheldon is the new Suits. What the heck? You never know what's going to hit sometimes. Well, that's sometimes why Hollywood is the way they are, because they're like, you just never know. And sometimes we're all shocked. Someone down there is like, I love young Sheldon very much. Thank you very much. And you guys are horrible. All right, Super Mario Brothers hit Netflix, and its viewership mushroomed after already being a huge hit everywhere else, including Peacock, where it has been for a while. But again, it just goes to show you how big Netflix viewership is and how some people they churn everything else, but their Netflix membership is consistent, or subscription, because that movie, everything kind of blows up on Netflix, which I guess is why Zazzy's sending so much of his content over there. There's a lot of Warner Brothers content on Netflix right now, which is nuts because they, of course, have their own streaming service. All right, so Squid Game, The Challenge, has been really solid for weeks now, which makes the season 2 renewal make a little bit more sense. And this is the second week for Candy Cane Lane on Nielsen. And I got a glance, as I said, at just the overall chart for the week prior, and Candy Cane Lane is held steady. It's about the same, but although that's a weekend versus a full week. But, it's around the same, so that's great. It's just, I would say, a very solid hit for Prime Video and Eddie Murphy. Amazon seems very happy with their continuing relationship with the comedic star. And he might just become their Adam Sandler, who, of course, has a fantastic relationship with Netflix. Although the new Beverly Hills Cop is also over at Netflix. But I loved Candy Cane Lane, by the way. Oh, I really loved it. Surprisingly good. If you didn't watch it this holiday season, make a note of it and watch it next year, because I thought it was great. On the originals chart, Netflix is dominating this list. I mean, wow, all the other streaming services, come on, get on here. Only Disney Plus managed to just barely hold on at the bottom. They're like, we're here too, guys. With the Santa Clauses season 2. It doesn't seem as strong as season 1, but at least it's in the top 10. If I were somebody who represented anyone involved with the Santa Clauses, I'd say, I don't see any of your other shows getting on here, right? It will be interesting to see how Percy Jackson does when Nielsen finally catches up to that show. Because, Disney Plus, they really need a big hit. Loki kind of was that, maybe a little. I mean, Loki and Ahsoka were solid, but they weren't like WandaVision or like the early Disney Plus shows. So we'll see if we get a Santa Claus this season 3. As I said before, all the sets are built, so it's probably a pretty cost-effective show at this point. On the movies chart, there's Candy Cane Lane just edging out Netflix's Family Switch, the 2 big holiday movies this season. I saw both of them. I thought they were both pretty good. Candy Cane Lane is better, but Family Switch wasn't bad. And they're both in their second weeks here. By the way, Family Switch was directed, I think I might have brought this up before, but by McG. McG! That's nuts. Disney Plus has a solid hold here as well, thanks to Indiana Jones 5 and the first 2 Home Alone movies. Really the only 2 Home Alone movies. We don't recognize the other ones. We can't go over Netflix's charts this week because Movie Math after New Year's was delayed till Tuesday because of the holiday, and that's when Netflix drops its charts, so I already covered their latest charts in the last Movie Math. But we'll be talking about them again next Sunday. All right, not too much change over on iTunes, the usual suspects here, although we did see a surge for Anatomy of a Fall popping up high into the top 10, probably thanks to all of its awards nominations. It would have been higher up, I think, earlier if the new iTunes store wasn't or Apple's, whatever they're calling it now, if it wasn't so difficult to read. It used to be really easy to spot the new releases, but now it's a little bit more difficult. So a lot of people just have to be like, where can I watch Anatomy of a Fall? And the answer is on digital. So then finally people go and get it. I guess the layout's a little better, and they've rolled TV and movies into one. Maybe I'll start covering. I don't know. I think Nielsen is really, because this TV is pretty far down the line. I'll think about it. I know some of you really want me to cover iTunes' TV charts. And again, now they're in the same space. But it's much harder to browse and discover something. And then also, although audiences are finding The Bricklayer with Aaron Eckhart for Rennie Harlan. Rennie Harlan! this week is a real blast from the past with Harlan and McGee. By the way, speaking of the new layout, did you notice that they got rid of audience reviews on iTunes? That's crazy. I wanted to see what the audience reviews were for this Bricklayer movie, and I was like, oh yeah, because I'd noticed this a few weeks before, but I was like, there are no more audience reviews. They just list the Rotten Tomatoes number. But I think one of the reasons they got rid of audience reviews is that over the past month or couple of months, maybe even actually ever since the pandemic, they've really become less about the movie and more about a review of the price point, particularly when it's a very expensive rental out of the gate, because they've shortened the theatrical window. So now a movie is often like $20 or $25 to rent, and people are very angry about that, and it often affects the audience score on iTunes. So I think that's one of the main reasons they probably got rid of it. So in your anger, you guys broke audience reviews. All right, so as for this coming week, Hollywood loves a holiday weekend, and with Martin Luther King Jr. Day on Monday, we've not only got Mean Girls hitting theaters, but also David Ayer's The Beekeeper. Will he laugh last when it comes to him having to ditch the Ayer cut? I'm curious. The early screenings for Beekeeper, it had some previews this past Saturday. They were pretty full, but maybe everybody went to see it then. And then also The Book of Clarence. On digital, there's Waitress the Musical on Tuesday, and maybe a few other surprises. They like to surprise you with digital releases. They're like, surprise! And it works, I think. You're like, oh, wow, I can watch it right now, and you click play. Even for a $25 rental, maybe. Or maybe it's usually like a $20 rental and a $25 purchase. Again, I own a lot of movies I normally otherwise wouldn't, because I wanted to watch them right away. While on streaming on Friday, Netflix has a new Kevin Hart action comedy. Although I just watched the Mark Wahlberg action comedy on Apple TV last night, and I got to tell you, it hit the spot. It was just what I was with my family, and it's just what we wanted. I thought that was actually pretty good. I liked it. So it's making me take a second look at this Kevin Hart movie. Hulu has Jake Johnson's directorial debut, and Prime Video has this movie called Role Play, which maybe some people will watch. Also, the Golden Globes are tonight, which I will be live tweeting. So be sure to join me over on Twitter or X or whatever during the ceremony. And then I'll review it tomorrow during the live stream. Then with series, 2024 is already starting to pick up. On Tuesday night, Disney Plus is dropping all 5 episodes of Echo at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is also when the review embargo lifts. So I've only seen the first 3, so I'm going to finish the show and roll right into the spoiler review, because it's a similar, as I discussed recently, it's a similar situation to what Netflix does, because if you have the review embargo lift when the show drops, for the most part, people are already watching the show. They're not going to go and check out the reviews because they're just going to go see for themselves. And I can't make up my mind whether or not I think that's a good strategy. We'll see. The social media embargo for Echo, though, does lift on Monday night. 11 p.m. Eastern Standard. All right, Ted the Series drops all its episodes on Peacock on Thursday. I think there might be some interest there, especially because Family Guy is still so popular. Although Family Guy is finally moving off of Sunday nights, which I think is an interesting move on Fox's part. Although, do people really watch it on nights, right? I mean, I kind of do. I have it set to DVR. It's one of the only things I still watch on network television. I watch Family Guy, kind of sometimes The Simpsons, and then The Amazing Race and Shark Tank. And then I think on cable I watch Bravo, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and $1 Million Listing LA. But that's all that I really watch that's not on a streaming service. And those are all on streaming services, by the way. But I like that. I don't like the idea of losing the potential to watch live TV. Like, how would I watch the Golden Globes tonight? I know it's probably streaming somewhere, but I don't know. It still feels weird to me. And also, it's caught up in the price point of my internet service and phone and stuff like that. So I think that's how they get you. All right, then, on Friday, Peacock has reality series The Traitors, that got a season 2, returning. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what do you think will be the big box office hits, the big ones of 2024? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.